Good evening on this chilly Monday evening. It's a Monday evening. I'm already flipping, but it's a cold and who cares? It's Monday evening. We're sitting around together. We're chilling out, and there's no Matt tonight. It's just me with my co-host Jonjo. I am Peter Ray Allison, and joining me ever faithfully, unlike Matt, is Jonjo.
Hello, Pete. Good to see you again after a few weeks.
Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks. I've been doing a fair bit of work in the gaming sphere. Yes, I'm currently working on Dracula Returns to Derby and did a D&D in the Castle, which was epic. So lots going on. And joining us, our very special guest tonight is Dr. Megan Connell.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, as is our way, who are you? What do you do? What's your thing?
Yeah, so I am a psychologist in the U.S. I'm licensed in 3 states, but my license is recognized in almost all the states thanks to something we have called the Psy Pact. I specialize in treating anxiety, depression, and trauma and autism in women and girls. And I also happen to use tabletop role-playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons as a form of therapy. And my book on the subject came out last year, Tabletop Role-Playing Therapy, the Guide for the Clinician Game Master. And I also learned yesterday I was featured in Time, and I didn't realize it. So.
That is an epic set of credentials. I mean, being featured in Time magazine is no small thing.
Yeah.
So, how were you winding back to how it all began? What came first, the therapist or the D&D geek?
Oh, the D&D geek. I started playing in middle school. It was, I don't remember what edition we were playing because I never had any of the books, but we made character sheets on notebook paper. And I was very obsessed with Tolkien at the time. I had taught myself Elvish. And so I just basically kept making Legolas over and over again. And this is well before the films came out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of draw for elves, especially in fantasy circles. My wife had never played D&D before until lockdown. And we thought, well, we can't go out anyway. We can't do anything. Let's just kind of play D&D as a family once a week, just kind of add a bit of fun, do something different. And the first character my wife created was essentially an elf. Legolas meets Liv Tyler.
Hang on. Liv Tyler was it Arwen?
Arwen, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, basically Arwen meet Legolas. But it immediately went for that character archetype. It really went for the elven archer. What's the draw for that? Why did you kind of lean towards Legolas?
He was my favorite character in Lord of the Rings. It's just something fascinating about this person who was very in tune with nature and was so light that they could walk on top of snow and could hear the mountains yelling. I was fascinated by that. And I also, the friendship between Legolas and Gimli also, I love the idea of that unlikely duo who became such good friends.
Yeah, that's a common trope in not just literature, but books and films, the uncommon couple. But I think Tolkien really nailed it. And also, to be fair, Peter Jackson did in the films.
Yeah, Peter Jackson did such a good job with the Lord of the Rings films. It's almost no notes, I think, when I watched them. I was like, yep, this is pretty much exactly what I had in my head.
Yeah. Did you find this, John? I mean, you're watching the films and thinking, yeah, that's just like I imagined it.
Well, do you know what? Because I made the point of reading the Lord of the Rings books before I watched the films. And the one thing I remember taking from the film in particular was because where it's obviously condensed down from a 400-page book to a 3-hour film, you feel like you're highlighting certain points a bit more. You're getting into certain action beats a bit quicker. I mean, especially in the Fellowship of the Ring, the idea of these 9 characters going on this journey from beginning to end, there's adventure, there's mystery, there's a few laughs, a few tears, there's some deaths. Spoiler alert for Lord of the Rings. But
a 20-year-old film.
But do you know what? It's one of them things that I remember, because I remember looking at Lord of the Rings, and I think it was my uncle said to me, "Well, no, you should read the books first. You should read the books." And when I did, every year for Christmas, he got me the Lord of the Rings because they done the extended edition box set.
Yes.
So that was my introduction to the first two of the films. So I had Fellowship of the Ring and I had Two Towers extended edition, and I loved them. I absolutely loved them. And because where I was sort of reading one book and then I was watching the film, reading the next book. So when I got to Return of the King, I was very, very excited for it. But yeah, do you know what? I think, yeah, you know what? Lord of the Rings is, I think it's just, even if you watch that film now, it holds up so well. I think because of where the text comes from. Yeah, I mean, what are we talking about now? Nearly 100 years now since Tolkien started all the Middle Earth work. So that's a long time to think. Then, so work from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, big budget films from the early 2000s, and that in 2024 we still have it as such a big impact to us. And
now we have the Rings of Power. Are you watching that, Megan?
I've watched the first season. I haven't started watching the second. I'm excited too, though, because another part of Lord of the Rings that I was absolutely just could not get enough of was learning about the Ents and the Ent wives. Yeah. And apparently the Ent wives are in season 2 of Rings of Power. And so I'm very excited to see that. And also Tom Bombadil. I understand why he was cut from the movies, but I want to see him.
Yeah, we do see Tom. I literally, my wife and I, when we saw Tom, went, "It's Tom!" And it's just like that joy. I mean, it was such a kind of not pivotal, but memorable character.
Yeah,
he did just stuck out, and his absence felt much more because he's such a memorable character in the books.
I would agree. Yeah.
But have you been watching any of it, Jonjo?
I've not watched it since the first season. I will be honest. And as much as I love Lord of the Rings, and this is someone who went to each Hobbit film on the day of its release, I kind of struggle with Rings of Power. I don't know why. I didn't hate it. I will say that I didn't hate it at all. But I just felt it was almost like each episode was I had to work myself up to it. I was really I had to push myself to get through each episode. Wow. And I know that's bad because I love Lord of the Rings, and even like recently I was going through some of my old books, and I even found I still had the Children of Hurin one, which I'd never finished reading, and I went back to that, and I love reading that. I did, but I don't know. I just couldn't get into the show. I will go back to season 2. I will get season 2 at some point. But I think don't get me wrong. If people love it, that's great because hopefully that opens the door for. Well, we know we're getting more Lord of the Rings. They got the.
We'll get the Gollum, the film, Gollum film.
Yeah. The Hunt for Gollum, which is actually being directed by Andy Serkis as well, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that gives me some hope for that AP. Yeah, I would say the Lord of the Rings or the Rings of Power, it feels disjointed. I think all the stuff in Moria at Khazad-dûm is just so good. The visuals of that and seeing the Dwarven culture is so compelling. I'm like, I want that show. And the dynamics between the actors for those scenes
the lean
so
into
good.
that, especially in the second season. I mean, there's it's almost taking notes from Game of Thrones. We had kind of different stories in different parts of the realm of Middle Earth. So you kind of got Numenor, you've got Moria, you've got Elvish lands, you've got not Khazad-dûm, Moria, and it's great. I'm loving it. It's not perfect, and you can't be for everyone because you can't please everyone. But it's fun. It's a high production Lord of the Rings series, and it's great. And the first couple of episodes did kind of take a while to get going, but about the 3 or 4, you really gets going and kicking in. And again, I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. We're kind of counting down the days until the next episode comes out, so we're happy.
Nice.
Yeah, and I mean, when were you kind of first getting into D&D? Dr. Megan?
Yeah, so it was middle school. We were playing a lot as friends. So we would make characters during lunch. We didn't actually play too many pain. So I went to a middle school where I lived in the country. I grew up in a very, very small town. And so it was 45-minute drive each way
Oh, wow.
to get to my school. And so all the students, you can imagine, were very spread out. So us getting together outside of school was a bit of a challenge to play, but we did sometimes. And it was a lot of fun. We greatly enjoyed just playing and telling stories together. Like I was saying, all of us were reading Lord of the Rings. I found Mercedes Lackey not too long thereafter and started reading through all of her things. And so I really was into fantasy and fantasy role play at middle school. Fell away from it a lot. Like always stayed very into all of those things. I loved theater in high school. Studied music in college, so that idea of like creativity in the arts was always there. But then kind of went to the psychology route, following. Honestly, it was in the U.S. is following September 11th. I'll age myself here. I was in college when September 11th happened, and I talked to some folks because I knew I wanted to serve, and they said, "Well, we're going to need psychologists. Go become a psychologist and then join." And so that's what I did. And I served in the Army for 7 years, active duty, and then another 2.5 in the reserves. So
Okay. So, I mean, what was your role in the Army? Can you talk about
I was a
that?
psychologist. Yeah. I was a
Okay. So
psychologist.
you basically helping the soldiers with mental health.
Mhm.
That was serving with mental health, and also I suppose that the element of the veterans are then returning to civilian life as well.
Yes. So it was a lot of getting folks transitioned from active duty to civilian life, and then also helping people just day to day, not just PTSD, but also just basic anxiety, depression, work-related stress. There's a certain amount of an interesting stress that happens when you're physically unable to quit your job and you're stuck at your job no matter what, and helping to work through those stressors and finding your own power and those things in there. And it was about the time I was leaving active duty that I started coming back to tabletop role-playing games. I was watching Geek and Sundry kind of at the height of its popularity, and Will Wheaton had his I think he called it Ashes of Akala. It was a fantasy age system. And I was just hooked, and I got the system, and I ran a couple of games for my family, but we started watching D&D on Critical Role, and we bought the player's handbook, and we bought the starter set and started playing, and I haven't looked back. And pretty soon after starting playing again was when I kind of realized how much insight you could gain through playing. And that was when I started trying to incorporate it more into my practice. I ran my first therapeutic gaming group, I think, in 2017. And then took a break from them during COVID, and in part while I was writing my book too. And then recently started back up. And so I have 2 groups going now where we use D&D as a therapy tool.
Were you ever tempted to especially ran D&D online over Roll20 and Zoom. Were you ever kind of tempted to kind of do that during the lockdowns?
So I have been doing online gaming since I think 2016.
Okay.
So I found a group online. We all found a night and a time that worked for us. We joined the game. The game master was terrible. We all quit at the same time, but reached out. All the players reached out to each other. It's like, okay, that game master was terrible, but you were kind of cool. Do you want to try again? And so one of the people volunteered to GM. Most of us showed back up. We kicked a couple people because they ended up not working out, but there's been 4 of us that have been consistently playing together every week since 2016, pretty much. We've had
that's good.
Graduations, weddings, births, and we all started off as strangers, and then my 2 kiddos were in the game master's wedding a few years ago. So,
yeah, it's I found that when you first started, no, they kind of go through that almost teenage stage where they're kind of finding themselves and finding their own niche, and kind of the people come and go. But when it kind of knits in hard, and you really build strong friendships when you're kind of locked in together.
You really do. And I think one of the big things about it, and this kind of goes into the therapeutic aspect of D&D, is like your stuff shows up in your character whether you want it to or not. And it's always going to be there. I love getting to talk about the intersection of psychology and tabletop role-playing games at different gaming conventions. And when I talk about what our characters can teach us, I always start off with a visualization of asking everybody in the audience to think of all the different characters that they've played over their lifetime. And they can, think about that pretty well. It's like, okay, cool. Now imagine all of those characters together in one party. And usually we get that little reactions like that, like, oh gosh, or or laughing. It's like, hello, welcome to your issue. That's why they don't work together, right? And it's such a central thing of like, this is what kind of drives us, and it helps us see ourselves, and like it's kind of this cool thing, but it is also this very vulnerable thing. With my game master, like he and I, we chat, and sometimes I'm like, dude, you got an issue with this thing, and he'll be like, no, I don't. I'm like, okay, one, you got a psychologist as a player. Number two, like this has shown up in your world 7 times. Like you keep building this into your world, like and just be aware of it. And like, I'm not saying like I need to be your therapist or anything like that, because that's inappropriate and wrong, but like your stuff shows up. And that, like you were saying, that intimacy, when it clicks, you really connect with your party, and you all just kind of connect, and you do see each other, and you have to build a really solid level of trust with people that you're playing with very regularly. And if you go and do something super awesome like D&D in a castle, it's a short weekend. You're going to have some fun. There's going to be some vulnerability there, but you come and go. But these more long-lasting groups, it's a lot more involved.
Yeah. What I found is, like, even though that the character you're playing is fantasy, and what your character does is fantasy, it lodges in your brain as something that has happened to you. Fundamentally, it is, an imaginary, but you relate it to as an experience that did happen. You recall it. Yeah,
you recall it in first person.
Yeah.
And like in the appendices of my book, I put a bunch of research questions in there. And that's one of the things I really want to understand. It's like, we know that we weren't storming the bridge, fighting the bridge troll. But when we talk about it, we're not saying my character, we're saying I. Right. And like it is a much more personal I than when we're talking about playing, Link in Breath of the Wild. Right. It's, like, oh, yeah, I was playing Breath of the Wild and I did this thing and that thing. It's kind of this more passive information. It's like, oh, well, I was attacking this troll and I jumped up and did this. And then and there's something like just very emotionally connected to these narratives that we create that is just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, especially for that dichotomy, the fact the way we recall it is in the first person, and yet we fundamentally know it did not happen. But the experience, we directly experienced it, but our mind can divide the fact of it was imaginary, but it happened. And I find that just a wonderful piece of dichotomy in the brain.
It's absolutely fascinating. When I was doing the research for my book, I came across this theoretical paper that, so something that can be a bit mind-blowing for folks is that our entire existence in some way is a bit of a hallucination, because we don't perceive everything that we see all at once. Like, we're looking at each other through our video screens, we see the rooms around us and everything like that. But really, the only thing our brain's able to process in any given moment is if you hold your thumb out and look at the nail, you only are seeing about a thumbnail's worth of information in any given moment when the brain is scanning. It's essentially doing a very rapid refresh all the time. And so what we see in this world is basically what we agree exists. And to that point, though, if we're all sitting at a gaming table and we agree that that world exists and those characters exist, in some way they do. They are sort of real because we are making them real. We are creating and bringing those things together. And I don't know, it's a cool concept to me. I was like,
it's a shared collaborative imagination.
Yes.
Yeah, and it kind of harkens back to these kind of these philosophical principles, like where we could be living in a simulation.
Yes. Yeah.
Based on how we process the information. Again, we're only getting a very small amount, and it's almost kind of a consensual global hallucination that what we call the real world could well be a simulation. And I'm going to stop there because my brain is going to explode.
Do you know what? It's I always remember from when the first Matrix film came out, and bear in mind, and Pete, this is not being horrible, but I was 10 years old when that came out. So
Get out! I was 25.
but what I really remember was I went round to a friend's to go and watch it when it came out on DVD, and I think the first thing he said to me after he watched it, he went, "Well, do you think that's real?" I went, "No, it's a film." And then like as like years went on, we had a discussion about it, and like we were talking about films, and he mentioned The Matrix again, and almost like word for word, he went, "Do you think that's real?" And I thought, "What the hell are you on about?" But then, do you know what? As like a teenager, I was like, maybe it could be real. Who knows? Maybe all this is just in our imaginations. Maybe, we are all hooked up to some big, like, techno-organic computer, or, we're all just experiencing stuff that is never going to happen. Maybe we are just all in pods and we're being used as batteries. And I think I almost had a bit of a panic attack at that time. I was like, oh God, is that actually true? Yeah. It's weird how things happen in life, and you're like, no.
But it's actually a genuine philosophical theory out there that yes, we could be, and there's no actual defining argument against it, which is even more terrifying.
I mean, because then you could also go, this is how far we're going to probably go down this rabbit hole. It's when, you get the different aspects of religion as well, and then you get things where they say, is religion, you go to somewhere where you come back as another person, or you go to a place where you are still you, but you're now living eternally as this version of you, or or what one I'd probably like. I'd like to have the one from The Good Place. Really, that'd be my ideal one. Just go somewhere, enjoy yourself as much as you want, and once you feel you've had enough, you just go through the archway, and that's it. You become one with whatever's there. I like that version.
I'm watching The Good Place at the moment with my 2 teenagers, and they love it. We're having such great conversations about ethics and morality and what it means to be a good person, and the reasons for being a good person, and corrupt reasons for being good. And they're 13 and 16. I never had that conversation when I was 13 years old.
Yeah. It's such a good show, and it stuck the landing for the ending, which so few shows do.
Yeah.
It was such a good job. Now, it inspired me to start teaching my kids philosophy. They're still in elementary school, and I got 3 different kid philosophy books.
For the UK listeners.
For the UK, so yeah, this would be from age 6 to about 12.
Okay, so roughly according to our primary schools.
Yes,
which is about
so primary
4 to 11. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so we're reading philosophy, and we're talking about it, and going through different theories and kind of helping to understand and shape the world, because there is a lot. It's this interesting thing. Like, I think the most effective learning about the world and information and about ourselves, to kind of go back to the psychology of it, happens when it's kind of not intentional, when it's sort of this accidental byproduct. And I think that's one of the reasons why, game systems that encourage this stuff can be so much more powerful than sitting there and listening to a lecture. Like, I could sit down and talk about what it means to have a firm boundary with people. And we can even role play having a firm boundary with somebody at a party. But there's something really different when you're playing your character and another character keeps pushing against the boundary, and you're role playing it, and you're getting to process out loud how frustrated you feel while still role playing that scenario. And it really sticks the lesson in there in a very different way. But it also does bring up those awesome points of like, what's right and what's wrong, what's good and bad. Like in a lot of the gaming worlds that I have, school charm spells are outlawed.
Okay.
Because charm spells are things like fast friends, charm person, geese, dominate person, dominate monster, essentially where you take the free will of another creature away, even temporarily. And, it's one of those things of, it's kind of cool to think about when you're, role playing, but then like you really start to think about the philosophy of that. It's like, oh, that's really scary and kind of gross.
Yeah. Because when I was running this D&D, the adventure D&D in the castle, which was kind of I drew on like a local folklore and the history of the castle itself to sell, and it's kind of basically and it just had the bad guy cast charm on one of the players, and I just didn't think it was kind of stop fighting. But when you put it as like imposing your will upon their personality, that is much more invasive.
Yeah.
Than how it initially presented itself. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to remember that next time. Yeah, I mean, because like again, but it brings up like elements of coercion, of manipulation, and yeah, again, horrible things that people do. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to mind epiphany there.
Joe, I was just going to say, because obviously we are diving a little bit into like mental health and things like that. I think that, and bear in mind, I'm not going to bring anyone that I personally know into it, but I think with anything to do with like mental health and anything that we experience, is even in 2024, it still feels like a very taboo subject. It does feel like there are some people that don't like to open up, a lot of people that don't like the idea of sharing their vulnerabilities. But then sometimes you got to find a way to I guess if you know that someone is having a tough time, someone that is needing that support, you got to try and find a way to get to them. Like, you're not trying to obviously bring their barrier down, but you want to support them. I think that's still a very hard subject to talk about. But then obviously, Dr. Megan, that's everyday thing for you. You are able to do that. You are able to support people. But then the way what I guess really what I want to ask is how, I mean, the first time that you did that, first time you actually helped someone, first time you got into that space, I mean, how is that for you when you're taking someone else's someone else's feelings, someone else's experiences, and then you're trying to support them?
Yeah, it can be a big challenge. When you're doing trauma work, the job of the therapist is to help shoulder the burden of somebody's worst day and to make it a little lighter and a little easier for that person. And like sometimes the best thing that we can do is just stand in witness of somebody's story. Right. And also like to reflect back the things that, we hear and that we see. One of my clients shared with me this comic that they found that I think really illustrates therapy very well, where it was showing the person who was talking, the client, and they had this big bundle of 3 different yarns all tangled above their head. And it was going to the therapist, and the strings were coming to the therapist, and the therapist was winding them all into separate balls and kind of present. And so that's a lot of our job is to help people reflect back and to see the information and see their situation in a different light, and so that they can understand and have more compassion towards themselves. It's one of the biggest things that I see is that people think there's something wrong with their brains. They think there's something wrong with them. And I've, outside of one person who had an incredibly bad brain injury, I haven't met a broken brain yet. When you really kind of listen to what's going on and understand it, most of the time it's the brain operating exactly as it's designed. The problem we all kind of have is that our base operating system was for about 12,000 years ago. And the world has changed considerably, but our brains really haven't. And so it's like when we can take that lens and have that understanding of like, okay, if we look at the base operating system of the brain, does this function kind of make sense? And most of the time it's like, yeah, it does. This makes a lot of sense. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just your brain's doing what it does in a way that just doesn't work anymore. And that's totally fine. It's about, helping to find that compassion and to grow and to build those things.
Yeah. There's also still a lot of stigma around mental health, about admitting that, people do need mental health help with the mental health. And I think that's almost like the biggest challenge, admitting that someone needs help. I mean, it's almost like a resistance to it. And
I think we especially see that in masculine culture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk now about toxic masculinity. And I think that's really an important conversation that we're having, of understanding of like, what it means to be a man in the modern world. And a lot of young men are feeling very disenfranchised and very lost. And that's a problem. And it's something that, we need to address. But it's kind of understanding like what does a positive male role model look like, and how do you own your feelings without being owned by your feelings, right? That's something that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with. It's this thing of like, we're allowed to feel and have our own experience, but our experience doesn't give us the right to dictate the experience of everybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because,
yeah.
Like if somebody doesn't enjoy Rings of Power, that's fine. Don't get down on the person who does. Right. Like, well, no, it's that thing. It's like people are allowed to like or not like things.
Absolutely.
Right. But it's when we get this thing of like, ew, you like that? That gets to be problematic. Like, I enjoy a lot of the Star Wars stuff that gets made. Yeah. But like, oh my gosh, the fan base of Star Wars is...
I think that's another thing as well.
Toxic
fan bases are unfortunately becoming more and more I mean one of my I know it's been around for a long time, but I think one of the major ones that I remember quite early on was when Rick and Morty was on, and it was one of them silly things. It was about because season 3 they brought out an episode so early, and the big thing about it was they were talking about the McDonald's Szechuan sauce.
Yes.
Which I honestly had. I think I'd had Szechuan sauce, but it wasn't a big thing in the UK. It wasn't anything that really come over to here. And then McDonald's, I think, sort of capitalized on the back of this, and they said, "Oh, we're going to re-release the Szechuan sauce to, get some bit." And then there was all these videos online of people ransacking the McDonald's, like trashing the place because they couldn't get the sauce. And then you got them like, so there's one kid like probably 16, 17 years old. He's like jumping about on the counter, shouting and screaming that he's Pickle Rick, that he wants his Szechuan sauce. He's flopping about over the place. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? And then like, there's other people then doing the same thing. And then you got people going, oh, well, the show wasn't as good. And even like the last couple of years when Justin Roiland got fired, you had all the people going, well, the show's not going to happen there because he's not there. Oh, you can't. It's like, well, hang on. No, they've tried to get rid of something that was bad, trying to, keep this show going that you're so desperate to have continue. So, but you're not going to keep the show now because the guy that was causing the problems, the guy that probably would have seen the show come to an end, you want him back in. It's what is wrong with people? I don't get how we are in that sort of time where people will think, yeah, I can act like an idiot and I'll get my own way. That's not how life should be. But it seems to happen all the time now.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that's a lot of like people feeling a bit lost and not understanding, how to, what's okay, what's not okay. And like, it's sort of this thing, like, in psychology, we talk about like different styles of attachment and like kind of understanding like how we react to things. And like, it's almost like societally, we don't know where the boundaries are because like, laws are intermittently enforced. And like, I think a lot of people, it's going way off topic here, but I think a lot of people are feeling a bit, frustrated because you see certain people can get away with breaking the laws and others can't. And like, that's not fair. And like fairness is something that is, very baked into not just like the human experience, but seems like the larger primate experience. There's some really interesting studies on compassion and fairness in chimpanzees. And I think even rhesus monkeys as well, which is interesting because they're famously not very compassionate, but it's, all of this stuff kind of gets jumbled around and like, it's hard to know where the boundaries are and to explore that stuff safely, and that's, again, kind of the value of role-playing games is that we can try things out in a place where we're not breaking a law, where we're not flopping around on a table saying we're Pickle Rick, in real life. That, we can practice how do we handle disappointment.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in the teens, like playing Vampire the Masquerade and other role-playing games, I did a sort of little mental experiment, and I created one character for Star Wars, the role-playing game, the old West End Games version, like with that way to roll D6s. And I put in like what I felt at the time was all my positive characteristics. So he was like the hero. He stood up for his friends. He's all that typical Star Wars thing. And in Vampire the Masquerade, I put in all my negative characteristics. Like I was slovenly, I was lazy, I get selfish. And what I found was, whilst my vampire character was fun to play because it was all my negative, and I got to channel that side of myself. Playing the Star Wars character was so much more fulfilling, and I felt better for myself for being that good person.
So it's nice to have something positive to talk about with Star Wars in 2024 after seeing some of the internet's reactions. So well done, Pete. And FYI, I'm not being negative against Star Wars because I am actually probably in the minority that really enjoyed the Acolyte. So
same here. Yeah, we enjoyed it. Absolutely fine.
Oh, I'm in a really weird minority of Disney things. I loved the Willow series.
Which one? Which series?
The Willow series that they took off of Disney Plus because it was such a flop. I thought it was fabulous because I think it was a D&D campaign that they did not change one bit from table to script.
I can see that. Yeah, it did have that sort of interplay that you would expect in a.
I just think they were. I honestly, when they first said about it being made, I thought it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the show, but I thought it was a joke because of there was a Ricky Gervais show, Life's Too Short, where they Val Kilmer meets up with Warwick Davis saying, "Oh yeah, I've got this idea for Willow 2," and then it turns out it's all a scam. I thought, oh, it's just oh wait, it's real. Oh wow, okay, this is actually happening. Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's one of them ones that like we see with a lot of Disney stuff now. They had so many ideas and they just went, "Yep, let's make it. Yep, let's make that one." Now I think they are starting to scale back a bit now. We are seeing, in particular with all the Marvel stuff. 2021, they had 5 Marvel TV series, which is, don't get me wrong,
it's a lot.
I enjoyed them, but there's a lot to keep up with. And, as an avid MCU fan, it's like, well, hang on. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's so many episodes of TV, so many films. And if you don't watch one of them, you might not understand what happens here. You don't see that. You don't know what goes on there. Yeah. And are you a true fan if you don't sit down for 20 hours of MCU a week? No, you're not. That's what it felt like. And Joe, even earlier today, the trailer for the first trailer for the Thunderbolt. For some reason, I was about to say Thunderbirds. I don't know why. My brain.
Wrong.
My brain is out of it. But yeah,
that's the 80s cartoon.
I really enjoyed that trailer. And this is the problem, because I love the Marvel stuff and I like the promise that Marvel does give, especially when, it's not going to outer space. It's not going
to a grounded portrayal, isn't it?
Yeah, I like stuff like that. And seeing that trailer today, I was like, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be good. Marvel, you still got your hooks in me, at least until Secret Wars. So do what you can, I guess.
Well, and this is the thing of I'm forgetting who it was. It was either Overly Sarcastic Productions or Hello Future Me. It was I'm pretty sure it was actually Overly Sarcastic Productions, but of having serious dramatic moments and just letting them stand. And to the point of the hesitation towards mental health and vulnerability of movies now almost always kind of wink at the camera when a vulnerable moment is happening. And it will circle back even more of our Lord of the Rings discussion of how rare in film it is nowadays to have that Aragorn and Arwen moment in Fellowship of the Ring where they're standing on the bridge declaring their love for each other. And there is no little kitschy ha ha at the end. It is just a genuine vulnerable moment. And it's such an interesting thing that we don't see that so much in our media anymore. And life will imitate the things that we see. There was a really cool study that was done or published, in 2011, I believe, where people took a nothing personality test, meaning they were just given words and asked to say how like or not like the words they were. And then they read text. They either read a bit from Twilight or a bit from Harry Potter. And then they took the personality test again. And the people who read Twilight started associating words with being a vampire as being more like them than before they read. And the people who read Harry Potter started associating words that related to being a wizard as being more like them than at the start. And so, like, the media we consume changes how we see ourselves. And so if we're not seeing people in media, this is why representation in media is so, so important. And so if we're not seeing that representation of being vulnerable, being open, being, if you think about, like, Aragorn is kind of like this amazing masculine example because he's able to be vulnerable. He is incredibly tough and strong and competent, but he cries. He tells his friends he loves them without it being like, love you, man. Like, just a genuine, like, dude, I love you. You're great. And like, we just don't see that in media that often. And it's so cool. And I think that's one of the big problems too. I would imagine that were we to see portrayals like that in media more often, we likely would see a bit more acceptance towards mental health and seeking help and showing vulnerability.
Yeah, I remember watching episode. I mean, do you remember 24, the TV series starring Kiefer Sutherland?
Yes.
I remember this one episode. I think the end of the third season, and he'd been doing all these things. He'd been kind of like done 3 days, so to speak, of like intense psychological, traumatic and physically demanding experience. And at the end of it, he was just broke down crying. I think that scene more than anything else has always stuck out with me. He's kind of finished, he'd done the day, and he just sat there and he just broke down crying. And that was such a powerful moment. And then suddenly this call comes through. Said, Jack, we need you back at CTU. And he had to kind of like shake himself out of it. Said, right, I'll be there. And drove off. And that was the end of that season. But just to kind of see that vulnerable moment after everything he'd gone through was really, really different, powerful. And also it was so powerful because you rarely see that.
Yeah.
Joe, I still probably think I know they call them seasons, but they always called them days as well, didn't they? I think day 3 was always one of my favourite ones because it was, I think up to that point, it was such a culmination. But yeah, there was a lot of vulnerability in there. I think that's a good. I'm trying to think of an example myself now, and I can't. I don't think I can really think of too many things that even get close to that. Actually,
Spooks was another one. I think it was called MI5 in America. It was about MI5 agents, but rather than glamorizing spy, it was kind of these people get killed. These people suffer, horrendous psychological trauma and breakdowns because of that. And that was kind of. But again, nowadays we rarely see that. As you say, we kind of get these kind of snappy shows where it's kind of like, where, as you say, nodding and winking at the camera.
I've got one, and do you know what? It's one of my favourite shows of the last 10 years. I even just finished rewatching it as well a little while ago. Mr. Robot.
Yes.
I haven't watched that one.
Oh, do you know what? That is very, for lack of a better term, and excuse the language, but very mindfuckery. It's one of them ones that, like, as you're watching it, you don't necessarily know what is really happening. You don't necessarily know that what you're seeing is the truth, and it's
highly subjective.
Yeah, but do you know what though? It's so perfectly made. It's so perfectly cast. Rami Malek is just, I mean, he's just a fantastic actor anyway. But playing this character of Elliot, he's just, he leads it throughout the whole series. He does like this like dark, almost like dark passenger kind of narration, similar to Dexter. So he is telling the story, but then he's a very unreliable narrator. So he's seeing things in certain ways. He's holding truth back from the watcher. He's watching truth back from his family, from friends, from co-workers. He's even holding back stuff from himself to sometimes not have to deal with what's going on in his real life. And I always just found every season of that show, I honestly thought there was nothing else that could shock me about it, but it could just keep doing it over and over. And even up till the last season, even them last couple of episodes, I think I got to the penultimate episode of season 4, So it was 2 episodes left of the show. I knew it was coming to an end, and it was just all of a sudden I just went, "What the hell just happened there?" It's very rare I've ever gone to a show and I've really just almost like annoyed at like, what is this now? What is this actually doing? What are you doing with this show? But not in an angry way, but I was just like, the rug has been pulled, something else is now happening, something else I was not expecting. And I think because I couldn't answer it, because I couldn't think logically, what is this show now trying to do? It angered me. I was like, right, I've got to now wait a whole week to see what is actually going on. This is really, and it's very rare that I've had a show like that that's really tested me. But yeah, if you ever get a chance, Mr. Robot is just, it's great.
I'll put it on my list.
But it's one of them shows that you do sort of, I mean, I've got a lot of friends who talk about TV shows, and then like we've been out or something, and they'll be like half on their phone, half looking at screen. It's like, how can you watch a TV show like that? How can you? And so, but Mr. Robot is definitely one of the ones that if you lose focus for a second, you'll miss something important, and you'll be like, right, no, that's it, show's over now, can't do that. But yeah, it's so good, so good.
So one thing I want to ask as well is, at what stage did you start introducing role play into your therapy?
So, yeah, like I said, it was 2017 was when I did my first pilot group. And it went really well. And I really was seeing a lot of growth in my clients. And so, it's taken a long time to kind of refine the process. And I still don't feel like it's completely refined with how I do it. Like my book is a lot of like, here's the mistakes I made, so you don't have to, of like what we've, I've learned along the way. And it's being at this stage of doing therapeutic gaming is really interesting because now that the book's out there, I know people are going to get into it earlier in their career than I did, and they're going to take the torch further than I have. And that's like a humbling and a very cool thing to be thinking about and to see it go. But, a lot of it is, we do this, the way I run it is essentially it's just group therapy. Where in group therapy, people come together and they have a stated goal that the group is going to be working towards. And so, we define what that goal is, and then we create, meaningful experiences around that goal to help people grow and develop. So like my groups, people are trying to learn positive peer relationships, creative problem solving, and assertiveness training. And so those 3 things are woven throughout each of the narratives. But then like I also try to create, special story beats for each player as well. So that way they have a chance to kind of shine and to grow as well. But it's challenging. It's keeping a lot of things in the air. When Gary Allen Fine published his Shared Fantasy, which is the largest ever study of tabletop role-playing players, and it was published in 1984, and it has not been replicated, which is a crime, because all he did for his study, and I'm putting air quotes around that, was he observed people playing D&D, and he wrote notes of it. It's a qualitative study of just what he observed through play, and he did that for 200 hours, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But like, it would be so much easier to replicate now because thanks to all the live play shows, people could easily consume 200 hours of live play and code it.
I wrote a chapter for Deviant Legend, Events of Deviance, a transgressive compendium, about the psychological benefits of role-playing games. Now, this was a peer-reviewed academic journal, and I had to back everything up. And I did that purely based on my experience. I was also speaking to people with mental health issues, like disability issues, physical disabilities. And yeah, it's kind of writing up that, but yeah, nowhere near about 2,000 hours. I could not do that. But yeah, it's a kind of a combination of history and observations from experienced practitioners, I think is how we described it.
Yeah, well, and what he observed was that when you play a tabletop role-playing game, you have to exist in 3 different frames of mind. So the frame of you, the human, the player, the frame of the rules of the game, and then the frame of the character. And you need to be able to transition between those 3 seamlessly, or else the game falls apart. If anybody's familiar with the Dread Gazebo story, that's an example of the 3 frames not holding together.
So what gazebo story is that?
The Dread Gazebo. Oh, you haven't heard this story. This is it's a famous thing that happened in D&D lore. So party's they've entered into like a park, and the dungeon master is like, yeah, so you're looking forward and you see a gazebo in the middle of the field. And one of the players is like, well, what's the gazebo doing? Nothing. It's a gazebo. I pull out my sword. Does the gazebo react? Nope, it's a gazebo. And this keeps escalating. Like the player shoots an arrow into it. It's like, what happens? It's a gazebo with an arrow in it, dude. And like, what came to pass was the player didn't know what a gazebo was. So he thought it was a monster. And so it was this very interesting thing of the frame of the player and the frame of the character working, and it happened to be in a very comedic way, but sometimes it can be in troubling ways where, like, if a character does something, the player might feel that the other player is slighting them or something like that. And so that's where the system falls apart. When we do therapeutic gaming, we add in a fourth frame of the therapeutic interventions. And so, like, any game master can tell you it's spinning a lot of plates all at once. But then when we add the psychology plate into it all, it's, that much more difficult.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in some games, you kind of have to kind of mitigate the bleed between the character and the person. But I suppose in these kind of therapeutic games, you want that bleed. You want that kind of emotional education to transmit between the two, don't you?
100%. I had one game that I did, is one of my more favorite stories, where I had a player who was very afraid to stand up for themselves. And they did not like to use harsh language at anybody or anything like that. And so I wanted them to confront a very indifferent, not mean, but just indifferent, dismissive NPC. But I wanted to orchestrate it so that they were frustrated when they met this person. And so it's like they finally get to the victory point, and the person who's there isn't going like, good job, you solved the puzzle. It's just like, why are you here? Go away. And we were role-playing this, and this player stood up and got in my face and was pointing and shouting at me. And we kind of resolved the role play, and I was like, okay, cool, time out for a second from the game. And I looked at the player, I'm like, you just shouted at somebody. And they're like, well, no, my character did. I'm like, you were controlling your character, but it was still you.
Yeah.
And you shouted at somebody, and it's okay. That, things resolved in a way that was functional for your character and for the party. And it's like, just note this about yourself, that you are a person who can shout at other people if need be. And that was a very transformative moment for them to kind of recognize that, because role play is practice, it's rehearsal, right? Like, it's little known fact, the biggest LARPing in the world is the U.S. military.
Okay.
Lots of training activities are just large-scale LARPs.
Yeah. War games, the war game practices to do. Yeah.
It's a LARP.
It is, yeah. It gives them the experience of being in a high threat, tense situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's helpful though, because you role play what you would do in those situations, so that way when it actually happens, it's completely ingrained, and you know what to do, and you know how to handle yourself.
Yeah, it's like essentially like 5X. You kind of you learn how to respond in a hostile situation without being in a hostile situation. So when it happens, you have that skill set ready to go. Right, I know what to do. I've done it before. I can do it now.
Yep. And that's the amazing part of the term that's used in LARP is bleed. I coined the term emotional permeability. Not because I think the term necessarily needs to be longer, but clinically, when I'm writing a note and I'm saying, Johnny experienced some great bleed tonight, somebody who does not understand what's going on is going to be like, what is happening in this group? Yeah. So, emotional permeability, like, yes, it's longer term, it's a little fiddly. Maybe somebody will come up with a better one down the road. But it does kind of hint as to what's going on to a layperson who doesn't necessarily understand the game in that way. But that is the desire, that you can have those moments where I have done this before. I did it as, Gregor the Barbarian, but Gregor did it, so maybe I can do it.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, I was a very shy, very, timid person. I was very reserved, very conservative, but I didn't have that sense of confidence that I wanted. So I played confident characters. I played people that were like over the top, that were outgoing, and it sort of taught myself through that, kind of emotional permutation that, oh, this is how you are confident. This is how you are, be outlandish and fun And it's just stuck with me. And I found kind of like a lot of people, especially in the trans and LGBT communities, they kind of use role playing games as a tool for exploring their gender and sexuality. To kind of like, let's see, like a male's like, well, let's see what's like to be play a female, or let's see what's like to be love another man.
Yes.
And it's a safe space because they've created a game which is consensually between everyone that know that they play the character slightly differently or to how they would normally present themselves. And so we kind of let them to experiment without any, untoward and negative ramifications.
Yeah, and it's just that cool place to try something out, and that's how we build empathy. And we've research from literature that shows reading books increases your empathy. And the more you identify with the main character, the greater the empathetic game will be. And so like I would argue then that a character that you have created is going to build more empathy. Now, research needed on that. People don't cite me saying like, Dr. Connell has said this is true.
Yeah.
I think it's true. That's called like the theory, the hypothesis. It needs testing.
Well, no, I think like everyone who plays the game sees themselves as the star. That's because it's the first person view. The role of the GM is kind of taking all those star players and having them work together as a group and realize that the group itself is the star player, not an individual. And so kind of managing the expectations of each of those, for want of a better, other players and kind of get them going in the same direction and yet still have their own shining moments of glory.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard balance, and like especially with therapeutic gaming,
I was going to say,
we're not. It's not an ongoing campaign. It's 10 to 12 sessions, and then you're done. And some places like they don't even know how long they're going to have their players. Like they might be running a game in a hospital, and so people hopefully get discharged from the hospital, and so you don't know who's going to be there week to week. And so trying to do what you can with what you have, it is incredibly beneficial, and it's hard. It is certainly like one of the harder things to do, but it's so helpful, and like I've gotten to, I was the keynote speaker at Reacting to the Past, which is a gaming group that does historical role play games for classroom events and classroom teaching.
Yeah,
it is so cool. The one I got to do was actually in England in I want to say it was in Portsmouth. It was like some early like witch trials and things like that were going on. And it was just so fascinating because the time in history was when the church was starting to lose its power as the government was gaining in power. And so the dichotomy between, I think we had the Archbishop of Canterbury and then the mayor that was there. And just their kind of power plays around each other. And then everybody else and we all had our roles and we had our secret motivations and like running around trying to make everything happen in this town. It was fascinating and is such a cool way to learn history that was so much more living than reading about it in a book.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of examples of roleplay being used to teach history rather than just reading it from a very bland history book. I know Dr. David Waldron in Australia at the Federated University there has used kind of roleplay to kind of, explain significant events. Our village school that my youngest goes to in, I think, year 5 and 6, so about 10 and 11-year-olds, they are taught the principles of government by role play. So they have there's a class of 20, and they give you're the leader of the opposition, you're the head of the government, you're the speaker of the house, and they kind of, rather than kind of say
that's cool.
they kind of role play out a parliament.
Oh, that's great.
And it's great. Well, and the children learn it by doing it. It turns into absolute chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hilarious, but they learn it.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited too. Like, I'm really into board games and I'm trying to figure out like how to write more and do more about board games as well. But like, I've got a board game coming soon called Votes for Women. And it's a game of how women fought for the right to vote in the United States. I got to meet the designer of the game and got to play it at Origins Game Fair in Ohio here, which is a lot of fun. And it was just such a cool game because it shows how difficult it is to change things. and there's so many amazing historical games too that show the American Revolution, show would try to show Viking culture. I saw one that was like the Tudor dynasty and trying to hold that together, because that's a fascinating bit of English history when you start looking at it. It's like, how did that not completely crumble in on itself? And it's like, it almost did.
Yeah.
It really almost did.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot going on there. I mean, how do you relax? I mean, how does Dr. Megan chill? I mean, you run therapeutic role playing games. Do you role play to relax as well, or?
Yeah. Well,
wow.
Like I said, I've got that weekly game that with my friends, like we're playing. If you're familiar with Dimension 20, they just did their summer series, which was Never Stop Blowing Up.
Yeah.
And so I found the rule set for that, and I'm running a Never Stop Blowing Up campaign for them. I highly recommend it to everybody. It is such a fun, and honestly, it's very easy as a game master, because it's sort of the players just are like, I'm going to run over here and blow up this helicopter. It's like, you do that. Yeah, go ahead, roll a hot check. Let's see how it goes.
Do you ever find you play characters that are very contrary to what you do as a therapeutic? Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. My first character that got all the way to level 20. Like, I'm a very thoughtful, quite anxious person most of the time, and so I tried to play somebody who's incredibly carefree, and just I loved playing this character so much. But oh boy, did she get into trouble! So much trouble, because she just she didn't think things through, and so it made me appreciate. And that's the other thing I think role playing has done, is like it can help me appreciate different parts of my personality that maybe I don't see as kindly as I'd like to.
Yeah, I remember like just when I was still, before I became a freelance journalist, I was like working in engineering, which is a very kind of heavily regulated industry. It's kind of a lot of rules, regulations, best practices, guidelines. You got masses of documents that you have to digest on how to engineering principles, and it really kind of grated against me. So when I got to play a game, I've played someone who just didn't care about the rules, kicked down the doors, and I played like this kind of security guard in Star Trek who didn't care for regulations, and he got himself so far demoted he was kicked out of Federation because he refused to follow the rules. But he was so much fun. Sorry.
Yeah, I was say it's so important to play that stuff, to have that outlet.
Exactly, and it was an outlet because I was kind of psychologically chafing at all those kind of best practices guidelines. Like just being able to kind of kick off and just have fun and do it anyway. I had the consequences, but the consequences were in game. It was not in real life. So yeah. So that was just fun to do, and just flip the bird to my commanding officer because they wouldn't tell me what to do. It's like, it's just kind of, it was that release which you cannot have in the real world.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, one last question, because we're kind of running out of time, is what do you have planned for the future? What's coming up for Dr. Megan?
So recently I have opened up practice Health Quest Innovative Therapeutics, and so we're expanding and doing more there and trying to do more education. Like I said, I'm really trying to write more about board games and bringing board games into things, because another thing that I do to relax is I play board games with my family a lot. I love Dominion. I love Everdale. We've gotten into Mythwind recently, which is a very amazing cozy Mythwind. It's a cozy game. It doesn't have a win scenario. You just play it.
Okay. Yeah, we play a lot of Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
Yes. Yeah. I actually haven't played that one, but I do know that one.
It's a lot of fun. It starts out collaborative. We all kind of, each is playing a character exploring this kind of haunted house. And then the haunt happens, and when one of you becomes the betrayer. And then kind of all these different mad scenarios, and it's just fun.
It's super fun. We love playing games. We just played a really cute one. It's called Keep the Heroes Out last night, where you play as the monsters in the dungeon, and the heroes are coming to get your treasure, and you have to keep them out.
That's a wonderful kind of twist on the usual dungeon crawl game, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. If you've ever played Cora Quest, it's kind of like Cora Quest but flipped. So.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that one out. Okay. And what else you got planned?
What else am I doing? So doing a lot of that. I'll be speaking at GameholeCon and running a few games at GameholeCon. I'm running my groups right now. Also hoping to start up a potentially Wednesday night live play of Baldur's Gate 3 with another psychologist friend of mine. She's very funny. We're both hitting the point where we're so busy we have to schedule our downtime. And so we're like, okay, we'll play together so that way she can actually finish the game because it becomes work if we're streaming it. And so our brains are like, yes, that is acceptable. You can do that.
Yeah, I must admit, I've not yet played Baldur's Gate 3. Everyone and their dog is telling me to play Baldur's Gate 3.
It's really good. It's really good.
I've heard that. Have you played yet, Jonjo?
I've not. But the thing is I've
got an excuse. What's yours?
I've got a terrible backlog of video games, and what's been nice is there's not been too many games this year that have come out that I've really wanted to get. So yeah, so that's a bit of an opportunity. But yeah, no, I haven't. I mean, I think this year the game I've been most stuck into, I know it's got nothing to do with tabletop, nothing to do with RPG, anything like that. Helldivers 2 is
I've heard
yeah.
I've heard a lot of people talking highly about that.
I was not interested in it at all. A few friends bought it and they encouraged me to get into it. And what's been fun is that, with friends, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of silliness. You do have a good laugh because you may accidentally, friendly fire is always on. So you may accidentally blow up your own teammate, shoot them. You could send down a rocket and you could, just take them out. And then when you come to the end of the mission, when the rescue ship comes down, they could be at the other end of the map. You go, no, too late, see ya. And then you abandon them, which is always fun. Or even better, and it's probably one of the first games in a long time where the community, there's very little toxicity to it.
Yeah,
So
I've heard that.
You can get in with a group of people that you've never met, but you could have a good laugh. And the worst thing that could happen, you accidentally shoot someone, they just kick you out of the game. You just say, I'll just go to the next one.
I must admit, friendly fire is a lot of fun. I mean,
it is.
Because again, there's no consequence in the real world other than just a general grumbling of "you shot me." I mean, I remember playing this the Halo LAN parties back in the when I was at university. Me and all the friends would kind of rock up together with Xboxes and TVs and connect up way back for online gaming. And we kind of like play like Sunday afternoons playing Halo multiplayer. And they were kind of like, my team were kind of running back with their flag. And I was there with a rocket launcher and saw this horde of Spartans running towards me going, hang on, guys, I've got them. Blew up my own team. And again, we lost the game, but it was just so funny.
It's like...
what did he do? I thought you were bad guys.
I know it's not a multiplayer one, but I always remember I was playing one of the Fallout games, and I pressed the wrong button. Instead of thinking, I've armed myself with a gun, I just basically just dropped a nuke right on myself, and then that was it. Everything was just wiped out. I was like, oh yes, I shouldn't have done that. Back to the beginning.
Okay. Anyway, Dr. Megan, before we sign off, how can people find you?
Yeah, so through hqpsych.com or my website, meganside.com, or I'm at meganside on pretty much every social media platform out there.
Excellent. And I will be at Bolton Stored Hobbies in Derby, helping them celebrate D&D's 50th anniversary by running a game for them. And I've been Peter Allison. Joining me, as always, is
Jonjo, who is, I'm not doing anything as exciting. I'll probably just, as I said, be trying to get through that backlog. Currently, Star Wars Outlaws is the game that's in the console at the moment.
And thank you, of course, to Dr. Megan Connell.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.